What if you grew up in a belief system that told you everything around you was an illusion? What if you were told everything that happened to you, from being sick to stubbing a toe to being bullied at school, was your fault for not knowing the truth? What if you were denied even the most basic health care, from pain pills to checkups to vaccinations? How do you unravel yourself from this belief system? And what happens when you do? My name is Hillary Alexander, and this is Leaving Christian Science. Welcome to Leaving Christian Science. This is going to be a special episode where I'm talking to a person who was not a Christian Scientist, but did come from another high control group, I think is a good term. And I want to occasionally pepper in non-Christian Scientists because I feel like there's so much that these groups have in common. And I think it's really helpful to see similar tactics and similar sort of mindsets,
Sure,
and just
patterns.
how like it's not unique to your group. And also that you're not alone in the things that people go through as they leave their groups and faiths, and
Yeah,
I think we all have sort of similar psychological issues, and I
100%.
yeah, and I think that's really helpful. So that's why every few episodes I'd like to bring in, a non ex Christian Scientist and talk to someone else. So today I'm talking to Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
How are you?
Good. Now, Sarah is a friend of my sister Madeline, but I'm now proud to say she's also a friend of mine.
Correct.
And over the years, we've kind of hinted at the fact that she was also in a super controlling Christian group as a child, and I don't know a whole lot about it. So I wanted to bring Sarah on to talk about her experiences. So Sarah,
Yeah.
why don't you tell us about this group you were in?
I was raised in the evangelical world with my grandmother, who was kind of the spearhead of taking us to church. She was in charge of taking me to church, my brother to church, and within that, she just kind of felt safe for me to stay there, and whatever she thought, I wanted. And so that's kind of the beginning of the evangelical Christianity, and being raised as a young girl in this all the way through, I would say my mid 30s is when I got out. There's just a lot of undoing that has happened during that, and a lot of programming that I'm still dealing with, that's still untying with that I'm good or bad. Like, it's basic stuff, right? Like, it's interesting.
Do you have sort of snapshots of remembrances as a child, either like church experiences
Yeah.
or especially things that didn't quite sit right, or things that you remember that seemed normal at the time that you now look back and go, "Oh my God."
A lot of it has to do with being a woman in the church.
Yeah, for
That
sure.
was a really big thing for me. And that's where it started getting stuck for me, is being a woman and what that means to be a woman. I was my grandmother basically prayed that I would be a virgin until I met my husband, that the husband would be a pastor's son,
Hmm.
who would also be a virgin, and we would virginally come together and help the kingdom of God. And whatever that means, bringing people into the fold, saving them from eternal damnation. Because there were two options: there was heaven or eternal flames. There was nothing in between.
Yeah.
So as a kid, I mean, I believe in Santa Claus. Why wouldn't I believe in this? Right? It's the same thread in some ways. Different, because Santa doesn't ask for my purity, turns out. Santa doesn't care, I don't think. So growing up, my grandma really pushed the agenda of winter camps and Christian camps and summer camps. And those were really good experiences because I was able to get out of my home life. My mom was a single mom. I did her best, had two kids at 20, under the age of 25, had two kids, was in the hippie movement, that sort of thing. And then kind of steered off into her own path of drugs and men and loose living, if you will. And so my grandmother came in and swooped us in and helped us get back on track, so to speak.
Yeah. So she, to use a phrase, she sort of like had this evangelical need to rescue her grandchildren. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is kind of sad, really. She saw her own daughter, in her opinion, go off the rails, it sounds like. And she was like, well,
Right.
I'm not going to let that happen to my grandbabies.
Yeah. No, that's such
Save
a
from
good point.
eternal damnation.
Yeah. But screw this woman. She's
Right.
already fucked up. And so that's the part that really, again, going back to the female cycle, how I think in this religion that I grew up in really was not very supportive of women at all.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah. That's a
So
huge point. Yeah.
and that's the point, because it turns out I'm a woman. You know what I'm saying? In this form right now, I'm a woman. So I don't have very many options. My purity is at stake. In order for me to marry well, I was told very young, very, very young, that if I had sex before I was married, it would end up in divorce. And divorce was the big word. You just don't divorce. You don't divorce. Not when you go higher up in the Christianity world, you don't. Dude, I have got some stories for you.
And that's so much pressure too. I mean, of course, none of us that get married want to get divorced, but
Yeah.
to make divorce this like horrendous thing, I mean,
It,
sometimes it's really good for people. Like,
well, that's just it. But dude, that framework was not available at all. It was, my mom is a sinner. She must have had sex before she was married because she's divorced. And that as a little girl, that was my programming. That's what got in, that my purity was super, super valuable. And that if I fucked up here, it would fuck up my whole life. And so, and there was not a lot of fucking that was occurring at that time, right? So it was really crazy. So grew up, we would go to Christian camps. And again, the thing is it's not all bad. It
yeah,
wasn't all bad. It was secured environment. It was a youth group. Like my kids would love to have gone to this minus the religion part, because every night we would meet at campfire or at the church every night, and there would be an altar call, and you needed to rededicate your life to Christ because you had unpure thoughts, or you, and this again, this is my point of view, it was unpure thoughts, it was having unconfessed sin, like maybe you're mad at your mom and that's going to really fuck your walk up with Christ. So we would have to go and do these altar calls, and during the altar calls, because it was evangelicalism, the signs of the spirit was being slain in the spirit. Do you know what slain in the spirit means?
don't.
So that's where slain in the spirit partners with speaking in tongues in my mind. Do you know what speaking in tongues?
Yeah.
So that was happening every single night. I would go to the altar. They would say, what is it? Rededicate your life to Christ. They put hands on you. And it was just a gentle push. And two catchers are behind you and they catch you. And that's the Spirit of Christ washing over you to recommit you. And then the catchers. And then a lot of times people would start speaking in tongues after they did that.
Yeah.
The secret language that only you and God have.
Did you speak in tongues?
I did a lot of Toyotas, a lot of Hyundais, a lot of Mitsubishis. Like I did,
Yeah.
but they were in the. I didn't know what else to say, but Hyundai, Hyundai,
Which is what it sounds like,
Toyota.
honestly. I mean, I've heard people speak in tongues and it does sound like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. No, it's intense, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's intense.
So let me ask you this. When you were doing these things,
Mhm.
did you feel like you had to perform it, or did it feel really authentic? Or was it kind of a mix?
I would say it was performative a little bit. It was scared. I was scared.
Mm,
The adrenaline, I'm up at the altar, people are looking at me. Now it's time to perform.
yeah.
Is Christ going to come? Is the Spirit going to wash over you? Um, because now you've been clean of the Spirit. So you should have these manifestations. So I think it was a little bit performative. It, um, yeah, no, I don't, wait, what was the question again? Was it?
Just curious if you ever had like real moments of feeling like, oh my God, Jesus just washed over me. Like this is so real. Or if I mean there's a fine line between like you sort of want it to happen so it seems to happen, or it just isn't happening at all and you're just faking the whole thing just to get through it. Like
Yeah,
there's a
a
difference.
little bit. And I think a lot of nerves. It was anxiety. So
Yeah.
is anxiety Jesus? Is anxiety everybody's watching me? Like again, it was like it's time for you to show up for your relationship with Christ. Show other people, that sort of thing. And so this went on all the way through my college experience, all the way through college. College, I went to an evangelical college as well. That was fun.
So it seems like you're constantly being demanded to perform things and prove things. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like there's so much pressure on children to constantly like do stuff. I'm going to guess that saving other people was part of it. Like did you have to proselytize to other people?
100%. You were
Yeah.
not a Christian unless you got people into the kingdom of heaven, period. Because as a little kid, I mean, as a little kid, you don't want people to go to hell.
Yeah. You genuinely want to help people. Yeah.
You do. You don't. Yeah, it's very innocent. It's
Mhm.
not. I remember trying to save some of my friends and feeling good and also weird. Like, is this what I'm supposed to do? Like, is this how this looks? Um, but it was pretty hardcore. I was in it to win it. I will tell you that. I was in it to get my Jesus stamped card, my Jesus card stamped, right?
Yeah. So do you feel like you had a real terror of like hellfire?
Oh, a
Like
thousand
very
percent.
real to you?
Any
Yeah.
1,000%. So in the Bible, there's this book of Revelations, and it's all about the end times. Did
Mhm.
you guys have end times where you were?
No, Christian Scientists never really they didn't have like an apocalyptic
Okay.
thing,
Yeah.
but I read Revelation. I read the whole book. Yeah, and was
Yeah.
very fascinated by it actually.
Yeah. It's pretty, I probably could do that now too without vomiting, but
Yeah.
I think um, it's fucking scary
Yeah, it's
as
like
a
somebody's
kid.
really bad acid trip gone
Yes.
horribly wrong.
So, and if you can frame it like that, it's so great. But I did not. I literally thought everything was the truth.
Literal.
Anything in the Bible was the word of God, period. Do not. And so this is where it got really tricky for me as a woman, because as a woman, the man has the power over you. There's scripture pointing to that.
Yeah.
So this is what started oh God, I can't do this. My brother who's younger is a big dumbass. Why do I have to, you know what I'm saying? It didn't
Oh,
make any
yeah.
sense. It
You
made
look
no
at the
sense.
you look at the men in your life and you're like, "This guy?"
What? They don't know what they're doing. Trust me. You're gonna want the feminine in there, you know?
Yeah.
But our roles were reduced to baby making, purity, whatever. The man is the head of the household, period.
Yeah. Did you do the whole like purity ball, purity ring, all that stuff? Oh boy. Signing
Yeah,
over
so
your sexuality to your dad and all this like
it was so bad, Hillary.
uh,
Great America would put on these concerts, Christian concerts, and I like Striper Petra. I'm trying to think. DC Talk was one. You may not know, but that's DC Talk was great when I was growing up. Um, and I can't, oh, James Dobson. So James Dobson, it could have been James Dobson or his son. One of these two would come out after this big, huge Christian concert. And the whole concert series was called I'm Not Doing It.
That sounds like an SNL sketch. That sounds fake. It's so ridiculous.
I bought merch. I
Wow.
couldn't wait to have a shirt that said, I'm not doing it. Right? Because
Yeah.
I think one of the pastors would get up and talk about, I had premarital sex with this woman. And now, because I had premarital sex, every time I have sex with my wife, now I think of her, my original girlfriend who I had sex with. And that's not fair to my wife. And he was crying, and don't do this to yourself. Whatever you do, you're not doing it. Stay pure for Christ. Okay. That's what I had to do.
Yeah. I mean, he may have been thinking of this other woman, but I don't think that was the reason.
Please.
You know?
And who cares if you're thinking? I don't know. The whole thing, it just is the dumbest thing in the world looking back. But I had the purity ring. I had a big old gold purity ring. I mean, I was golden. I was golden. I did a great job in high school.
Yeah, I'm extremely grateful that Christian Science didn't have things like that. Like there was no, I think it's probably the only religion in which there's like no patriarchy. That's just not a thing because there's no authority figures and it was founded by a woman. So I don't think that she thought in those terms in the 1880s. I'm sure she had no idea what feminism was, but
Right.
just by nature of her being a woman and founding this thing, there was no sense of the men are superior and women need to, you know, obey their husbands. And there's certainly, again, because I come from a belief system where like nothing is real, like there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about sex. I think it was sort of understood that as a Christian scientist, like it was important to maintain a certain lifestyle. Like I very much bought into the don't have sex till marriage. Of course, that fell apart because I didn't get married till I was 50.
Yeah. Wait,
that
so
was
did Christian Science deem that on you?
no.
You just took that purity on whatever.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to other Christian scientists about that because I don't really know where that came from, and I don't know if that was just me. I don't think it was though, because I years ago I remember talking to other Christian scientists who were very much in that like no drugs, no alcohol, no caffeine for a lot of us. Like I still don't really drink caffeine, and just sort of having this like morality, but it was very vague. So it was the opposite of what you went through. It was not this like shoved down your throat constantly thing, which I can imagine is so hard to deal with.
It's so interesting to me to think about why that's so valuable to them. What is it besides mind control in some ways? I mean, if they're controlling your body, they're obviously got something in your mind controlled. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine that if there was a thought process behind it and it wasn't just some weird carryover from concepts from thousands of years ago when women really were super subjugated. I would imagine if anyone ever gave it any thought, it probably has to do with this is the only way to get women to have many children.
Yeah.
Because if they have free will and if they work and if they have lots of sexual partners before they find a husband, they're not going to have 10, 12, 15 children, most likely.
Yeah.
And it's in our interests in this religion to have as many children as possible to keep it going.
And that's correct.
Yeah. And also men just don't want to hear women run their mouths. They don't want to hear women be powerful and listen to their opinions.
No. Right. Because we make sense. I know. It's weird. And then also I'm curious too, because women's place were in the home, period. That's scripture, Bible. Like I had a discussion one time with this kid named Kyle in college, and I was starting to like, ooh, this didn't I was starting to kind of get my head around that this could be a tickle bit of a brainwashing situation, because I just couldn't understand why the divine God would pinpoint one sex over the other. It didn't compute for me, again, because I had a dumbass brother. So it's like, nothing made sense to me in that regard. And then, so women were kind of put in this purity cycle. And then there was absolutely no gay people.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing too with you in your religion?
That's another interesting question. I think it was just sort of politely not talked about,
Okay.
because
Okay.
in Christian Science, there's no concept of sin. Like, we're not original sinners. We weren't born into sin. We're not capable of sin
Big
because we're these
difference.
perfect children of God.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, like, if the Christian stance is that being gay is a sin, just doesn't really come up. Now, did I know openly gay people who were Christian Scientists? No. But it was also the 70s and 80s where
Right. Not everybody
a lot
was
of people were in the closet and people weren't coming out as trans, and it was just a totally different world. I don't know what it's like now, but I'm going to guess that there's still this sort of weird Christian-y stamp on, like, well, you can do that, but just don't talk about it. I'm going to guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which makes me mad, because obviously that sucks.
Well,
But
and
it
it's
wasn't like anyone ever said anything about it. Like,
right.
homosexuality just was not discussed. Like, sexuality in general just was not an issue or a thing. But it also kind of left you without any guidance,
Yeah.
Like, what do I do with this thing? I'm not supposed to have a material body that gives me either pleasure or pain.
Right.
So how does sex fit into this? Where does it go,
Where does it go? Well, I would also say too, what was like, now that I've, gone through this process, looking back at how much sexual pressure, it's very sexually charged in the Christian church.
It's talked about constantly.
And it's so interesting because there's only one way to get to heaven. There's only one, and so in order to get to heaven, you have to be married in a heterosexual period, right? And that in order to get to heaven, these are the paths you have to go through. Like, there's certain obstacles you have to go through in order to make heaven. And I also I was not sexually abused from the church, but I would argue I was in some way. I wasn't physically, but emotionally, there's no question. No question. But the amount of friends I do have that were sexually abused in church is a thing. So now we're talking about women's sex, homosexual sex, and now we're talking about sexual abuse, and all three are they're rampant. I mean, it's so that this, as a woman and just checking in with my own soul at the time, something was off. Something was off. And but my very favorite is how creative the Christian university got around sex, and how you were to, it was great. We called it Christian sex, and it was the best. You can put anything anywhere, but not the Holy of Holies. The other Holy of Holy, you could do any holy you can have sex with. You know what I'm saying? But the Holy of Holies, you cannot penetrate.
So was this something that was talked about by, like, elders, or was it just sort of whispered about amongst the students? I'm curious if this was an official policy that you could have anal sex.
100% in a policy. 100%.
Wow.
Yeah, no way. No way. You're not going to college. You're signing a contract. You're signing a contract that says, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
There's so much sex going on in Christian colleges. I can't. So it's, I mean, and that's what they should be doing. I mean, in some ways, like it's, anyway, I don't know how this all ended up on sex, but it's part of my undoing, right? It's part of being a woman and just that the whole purity thing. And I mean, I was at Thanksgiving this last couple days ago, and my grandmother had some friends over that hadn't been over, and we had known them. They were pastors of this church, and da 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 da. And I was really good friends with their daughter. And I said, "Oh, is so and so going to be there? Because I haven't seen her in so long." And she's like, "No, she's not there. She's accused her father of sexually assaulting her.
Whoa.
She's crazy."
Uh,
And so that really stood out to me. It's that kind of stuff, right? Like, we're going to believe the patriarch, we're going to believe the pastor over the children. It's all of that nonsense. I don't know. It gets me. It gets me.
yeah. I mean, they just released a series about the IBLP, I guess, where then the rampant sexual abuse in this evangelical group on they just released it. And I don't think releasing around Thanksgiving was a coincidence.
No, not at all.
And once again, not surprising in a system like that where women are completely disempowered, that you're going to have rampant sexual abuse that just goes on and on and on for decades, and people get shuffled around, just like in the Catholic Church. The perpetrators get shuffled to a new congregation and abuse everybody there. I mean, it's so freaking gross.
Well, and it affects our society when it keeps breeding this unhealthy view of religion. What am I saying? Like, this unhealthy view of your sexuality. Like, I don't know. It's so perverted because they prey on the weak with this whole thing. And then I don't know. It really rubs me the wrong way, for real.
Yeah. I mean, I really hate how for so many people sex has been just like ruined by groups like this,
Yeah.
and your sense of yourself, of your body, I wish everyone could get proper therapeutic help, because everyone who's been in that, men and women, but mostly women, let's be honest.
Yeah.
I wish for them that they could really heal from that. And I hate to use that term heal, but it's appropriate here because it's such a huge and important and joyful part of life. And the fact that it's been like stigmatized and ruined is really, it's awful.
Tragic. It's tragic is what it is.
Yeah.
And I see, I see these girls and trying their best, and they're trying, and I see them coming out of the church, and they've got their it's so triggering.
Oh yeah.
The whole
seeing people still in it. I find that too. Like, even when I watch documentaries, obviously not about Christian Science because there aren't any, but
there
about
isn't?
other groups, as far as I know, like not any major ones,
Okay.
no big exposés or anything like that. But I watch a lot of cult documentaries, and whenever I see people coming in and out of churches and there's young girls, and it freaks me out. It freaks me out.
Oh my gosh, have you watched The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City?
No.
I'm going to say go ahead and get on that.
Okay.
That is where their religion is a major player on the show.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting, and it's very similar to what we're talking about here. But even hardcore, like, anyway, it's fascinating. It's a good filth.
I listened to a podcast called Mormon Stories, and it's actually like ex-Mormon stories. It's interesting. It started off being, a person who was in Mormonism, and as he was doing the podcast, he kind of left.
Like, he could hear himself talking almost.
Yeah. And so now it's all these ex-Mormon stories. And I actually know a lot of Mormons for some reason, and in various stages. Like, some are just full in, some are completely out, some are kind of in between. And it's really interesting getting to know their belief system from the outside and going, oh, okay, I understand that now. I see. And again, there's a lot of purity culture, a lot of being told, if you have sex, you'll be a chewed piece of gum, and who wants to be a piece of gum? And
no. I had such, like, the most gorgeous boyfriend in college. and we were just, doing a lot of Christian sex. And he had to call his mom and confess to his mother, and then went to the pastor and confessed that we weren't having intercourse, but it like the without even consulting me, he went and told all of these people as if to like lay his burden down. And I remember feeling such a hoe bag. I was like, oh my God, like it's so crazy. Like this natural thing that's happening, where there's chemistry, and it's completely raped by the church.
Yeah.
Like it just, all of it. It's so sad. It really is sad. And it's still happening.
Oh yeah.
It's still happening.
Yep.
And that's the part that's so interesting. So we just moved here from New York City, and there's not a lot of openly evangelical people out and about in New York City. They're there, but it's just that's not
a
the
thing. Yeah.
When I moved to Orange County, what? it's kind of a badge. It's kind of a badge. It's here, and it's still the same. It's the exact same. So
yeah, it hasn't moved on with the times.
It hasn't.
Like it's probably the same as it was when you were a kid, which was,
Yes. It's alarming. It's alarming.
Yeah.
We moved here, and it was in the middle of COVID, and I went outside because there was a lot of fires happening, and there's all this like smoke from the Santa Ana winds. And I went outside, and my neighbor, beautiful young woman, out watching her kid play. And I was like, hey, what is happening? I'm from New York. This is all new to me. And the internet's down. So obviously it's apocalypse. And she's like, oh, these are the fires. This is a true story. She goes, this is the apocalypse is coming.
Whoa. Okay.
This is a neighbor. And she's like, listen, the apocalypse is coming, and you need to repent and accept Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior. And that is when I was like, holy fuck, where am I living? I had no idea people still did this.
Yeah.
I did, but it was so jarring. This beautiful woman witness. First of all, bitch, how do you know do I look and you just, there's a sinner. That's what sinners look like.
Yeah.
It was so bizarre.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it must have been so triggering for you,
Yeah, it was. It really, I kind of can't believe it's still happening.
Yeah.
And you must have that too, like people younger than you that are still in this church and this organization. And I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I've said on here before, like, I can't believe any group like this has survived the internet.
That's such a great point. Yeah. Information age. Now you guys have information.
Everybody has a fucking phone. Like there's no reason that you can't get information.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, it goes to show that like, even if they were exposed to the scandals or the truth of these things, I mean, people stay in these groups for many complex reasons. And it's not just because, it stopped making sense. Like people stay in for their families. They stay in because it feels safe, maybe. There are just so many reasons. And unfortunately, exposure to information, as we've seen, is not enough to get people out. Because you'll just deny it. I mean, I certainly had enough people challenge me as a young girl about Christian Science and tell me how crazy it was. And I didn't leave. So, they would point out all the hypocrisy and all this stuff and say things about the leader, Mary Baker Eddy, and how she was really, doing X, Y, and Z. And it wasn't enough.
Nope, it wasn't enough. Because the thing is, I think it was providing something else for us as well that we couldn't let go of until we got to a better place in some ways. For me, that was my experience. Like I was born into the hippie 70s. I was born on a commune. My parents were in a commune, a Christian commune. Again, young and dumb, but I mean, when you think of a commune, I was like, oh, that sounds so lovely. It's so funny. They weren't allowed to we weren't allowed to see people in the commune. They had strict visitation rights to outside family members, so that doesn't feel right. But I went to a Christian high school where there was a lot of good people at that high school, and that's where it gets tricky because there's really good people there.
Yeah.
And so how do you thread as a kid, this doesn't make sense, let me just deny all those parts of me, because I really want connection.
Yeah.
I really want connection with these people. I need connection. I'm fucking 15. I need connection, right?
And you need to feel like you fit in and belong to a group. And I mean, all of this is normal human stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So I certainly didn't want to let go of anything. And then I was winning Christianity. I was stamping the card. Girl, what did you need? I was in the choir. I was witnessing to people. I spent so many, when people were going to spring break, I was going to Mexico, witnessing to the poor brown people.
Oh, God.
I mean, the whole
Cringe.
it's so cringy when you go back. And just meanwhile, I would leave my house, which was a hotbed of crazy, to go save people. None of it, I couldn't even save myself.
Right. You know? It's like, am I qualified to do this?
It's so crazy. And so
So talk about coming out of it. Like, how did the pieces fall? Were there specific things that happened, or like how did you come out of like belief in general?
Yeah, I think your sister and I actually were really on the same cycle, which was really crazy to have somebody else go through this that you didn't know. Like, I knew her, we had met in New York and in work, and so I'm going to tag back around with Madeline because she was a real help during that time. We were both really struggling because you're coming out of an identity that there isn't anything else. You didn't invest anywhere else. I have no investment anywhere else. So when I got to New York, we started attending. At this time in my journey, I had gotten out of evangelicalism and straight into Catholicism.
Interesting.
Yeah. We were going to a very progressive church that was very progressive, that wasn't considered part of the diocese or whatever that is. But so it was called the Paulus Center. Really good people, a lot of women speaking, it was more about like helping homeless people and whatever. So when we moved out of that was in Boston. And then when I moved to New York, we started going to another church. And when I would walk in, I just started getting panic attacks.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it.
It's like your body was telling you. Yeah.
Couldn't do it. And so my husband was like, he was really into it, and like it would cause problems. Like, I'm gonna not go to church on Sunday, and he would feel it like, and it's that old cycle again coming up. I'm not doing good enough. That was getting worked out in my marriage too. So one day, and then around the same time, I started therapy. And so therapy really helped. And she wasn't a believer in anything. And it was fascinating to me. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to tell you some stuff about how I was raised and this dude, Jesus, and this whole heaven and hell stuff. And she thought I was crazy. And it was so refreshing for somebody to hold space and go, I'm not sure that's right. I'm not sure that's helping you in your holistic journey here with me. So that was happening. And then I would be going, so I still would try to tag into church. And all of a sudden I said to my husband, I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to give up church for Lent.
I want that on a t-shirt.
I literally said, I'm going to give up church for Lent, and I'm going to start going when I don't feel so horrible that I'm not going. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You didn't want to be guilted into going.
Yeah.
You wanted to go
And
because
I
you
never
wanted
went
to.
back.
Yeah.
And I never went back. So that was the beginning of my separation from all religion. Now, when I went back home and told my grandmother that I was Catholic, they would witness to me. They thought I was totally backslidden. Half my family wouldn't talk to me. They stopped talking to me because I was Catholic.
Yeah.
Okay. Like in the evangelical world, when I was like 17, I went to Romania to be in a choir called the Singing Cross, where we went and all we did, we flew all the way around the world to go sing in a choir in the shape of a cross to, you ready for it? To Catholics, to save them. So now that's some inner workings right there. So now that's the power struggle of the religion that I was in.
Yeah, it's interesting. Christian Scientists in particular have this weird beef with Catholics. And
I
we've
love
all
it.
been trying to figure out, why is this?
Oh, I love
And
it.
I don't know that anyone really has the answer, but I know that growing up, our mother would always make these weird little offhand comments about Catholics in particular,
Mhm.
that they were like working against us in some way and getting together and like conspiring.
Did you ever try to witness to them? So how do
I
you
didn't,
recruit people to
thankfully.
your religion? How did you recruit people to your religion?
No, because proselytizing wasn't really a thing in Christian Science, thank God. I
Oh,
definitely talked about it and tried to influence people in ways that I'm super embarrassed by now.
oh my God, girl,
I
don't
mean, I
even.
did like try to get people into it in a sense of, hey, I'm into this cool thing, and I want to tell you about it. And I want to find each and every one of those people and personally apologize to them because
So true.
it's so embarrassing that I did
Cringy.
this. But I will say it's not like a policy. It's not something you're asked to do. It's not something you're expected to do. It's not really talked about. Like, go witness to people. That's just not a thing. I think
Yeah,
it's just, again, like the sex thing and the not drinking. And I somehow got the message that as like a good Christian person,
yeah,
that don't hide your light under a bushel,
100%.
that it is something that you need to like, you need to be a good example, and you need to, if someone shows an interest, talk to them,
Yeah,
see if they
yeah,
want to come to a church service, see if they want to go to a reading room.
yeah. I I have this funny story that in college that I have to tell you about. So, evangelical college, my roommate, I'm not going to say her name, was a big superstar in the Christian world because her father was on Trinity Broadcast Network. And he had a standing show in San Jose and had a ton of following. Um, and they were basically, this family was like the epitome of what a good Christian family would look like. They had like 4 or 5 kids, whatever. And my college roommate was the last born, so we got all the benefits of it. And he used to work with this huge pastor called Benny Hinn.
Hmm.
Look him up. And if people know Benny Hinn, I got to meet him. I got to go on. He was selling out. I mean, he's the what Amway of religion. I mean, this guy would sell out like not coliseums, these huge arenas. So he was coming to Portland. I was living in Seattle at the time in college, and we got invited to go and be with him and be front row to this huge evangelical, sold out, like 4 days, sold out, packed arena in Portland. And so we go, and I'm super cute at the time, and I'm pretending I'm virginal and all the things. I am showing up for Christianity, girl. Okay. Mama needed to get a husband. I was 20. TikTok, it was late. So I came with an agenda. They put us up in the fancy 5-star hotel. It was lovely. Went to the shows, and Benny Hinn I got to meet him, You've got to look into it. You've got to look into it. So he was staying at the same hotel as we were, and he would never have a hotel. He would never sleep in the same hotel with his wife because the Spirit of Christ was too big. And the only people who could stay in his suite were the 2 bodyguards, the males. And, neither here nor there, but I just found it interesting that this woman of God, this wog, we called her. That's right. Don't mess with the wogs. Wouldn't be able to sleep with her husband in the same room. I mean, they are making fat stacks. They are printing money at these places. First of all, we also need to talk about how lucrative it is to be in a cult.
Yeah.
Great business. For this,
the top line, as I like to call it.
I was in the top line, front row Joe, and it was like I was a celebrity. He brought us up on stage.
Wow.
He put hands on me. There's probably video of it. I was slain in the Spirit. But when you have, I don't know, 15, 20,000 people staring at you, you jump, monkey. You do it. You perform. And again, I was 20 and I didn't have a husband then. So I had to get somewhere. So it's this kind of stuff. And so we went in the back after the big performance, and he saved so many people. So many people came to Christ. And we go in the back, and we're having dinner, and he's a little bitch. He's a bitch. And it was so like all this stuff, all these things were like, what? It was crazy. And then he comes up to me in the middle of dinner, like we're all having dinner, and he comes up to me and lays his hands on me. And these 2 sexy dudes that sleep with him in his room, they caught me, girl, and I was not mad. You have to play the game, and that's what I was doing, right? I was trying to win. I was trying to win Christianity. I literally believed that there was a hell up until like Obama was in office. Like it's like it gets in your brain.
In there. So that's an interesting point about hell, because I realize this is a huge issue for people.
Yeah. It's not just divorce, it's eternal fire damnation.
Yeah. So talk about that process of letting go of the fear of hell.
It still sneaks up on me, girl.
Every
now and then. What if? Right? It's that what if they were right? What if the universe has come up with a plan to have fire and brimstones, and because you did weed last night, that's where you're gonna burn all night for the rest of eternity. I think to be honest, I think hell started coming apart for me when I realized Adam and Eve's story was probably also a myth, and what a great myth that was for the man.
Yeah.
Right? What a great
started thousands of years of misogyny, basically.
We are ribs of Adam. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah, so we're ribs of Adam. And we, in our nakedness, said, I want that apple. Come over here and eat with me, bitch. And then Adam comes over, and then all sin and hellfire breaks loose. So
it's all our fault.
And it's all our faults. So I want to recreate the whole Eve story, where I just don't know. I don't want to recreate it. That's the wrong thing to say, but I think those things are connected.
Oh yeah.
The Adam and Eve and the hell story. And I think we do a pretty damn good job of doing hell on earth to our own emotionalness. And I think this is it at the end of the day. I think it might be it.
Yeah. I mean, that's my opinion.
I don't know.
I could be wrong, I could be wrong. I don't know.
We don't know.
Died and come back, but I'm certainly not going to believe in things that are extremely unlikely. Let's put it that way.
And then to tell your boys and to tell your kids, here's the thing. If you have sex, because I don't want my daughter to get pregnant or diseased or what, all the negative things that will happen, if I can tell her, hey, listen, if you have sex before you're married, you're going to burn in hell. Can you imagine telling that? My daughter's 16. I cannot even imagine fucking her life up more than to tell her that.
Yeah.
It makes me want to cry.
Yeah. Yeah. I every day I'm so pleased that my children are not growing up in Christian Science. I gotta say. And I
Yeah.
think of, again, I'll always say that it did give me some comfort and some peace.
Yeah.
That is true. But as a
Good.
friend of mine pointed out, like you, if I'd lived in a peaceful and comforting household, which I didn't,
Right.
I wouldn't have needed to tell myself lies to find comfort and peace,
And I think that's what happens, right? In some ways, the church takes, this is the rules. I didn't have any rules at home. This is
They give you structure.
here's the structure, and it only is going to cost you your soul.
Yeah.
But as
Yeah.
a kid,
Mental
and that's
health.
the other thing, the preying on the, I don't know, it's really upsetting. I can't imagine. I don't. I mean, we still have friends who are in it, and it's a trip. It's a trip to let them just experience it, and like, in this much as I'm not going to save you from heaven, I can't save you from your own beliefs. Like, you have to get there somewhere, somehow, right? I'm not in
Yeah.
charge of everybody's salvation. God damn it. It's a
Yeah.
lot of pressure.
Yeah. And the thing is, for most like heterosexual people that happen to find a good partner
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
don't have like major health issues, they can be in a system like that and it's mostly fine. But when it all falls apart is when somebody's gay or somebody's trans or somebody's disabled or,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
that's where it all fucking falls apart and it doesn't work anymore.
Or you
And
wear a short skirt, because that was mine. In my
yeah,
high school,
or a
I had,
spaghetti strap or
yeah. And what we wear, it reminds me of another religion, world religion, like the silkiness of their hair. Their hair has to, like, because men are gonna backslide if
right.
they see our pure body,
And it'll
because
be
they
our
can't control
responsibility,
themselves.
not theirs. Yeah.
That's sorry.
Or
You want
our
me to tell
fault.
that to my daughter? You want me to teach my sons that? Fuck you. Fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm pleased that we can raise boys in a time where there's so much more understanding about things like that and about like rape culture and not objectifying women. And, I we had an incident in our swing dance world where there was a person harming women. I'll just say that.
Sure.
And this was in like 2015. So it was actually like right before there was this big cultural shift
Mm-hmm.
regarding women and, assault and things like that.
Yeah.
And there were some people that were ahead of the curve who were
Yeah.
saying, I believe you to the victims, and just completely rallying behind them. And there were some people that were doing that old, what were you wearing? Why were you there? You wanted something out of this too. And I have to say, I think a lot of those people would not be saying that now because
Yeah.
there's just been so much education and information. And I'm definitely one of those people. I mean, I'm a product of the 70s and 80s. I watched all these shitty 80s teen comedies where like having sex with a unconscious girl is like comedy,
Hilarious.
I mean, I grew
For
up with all that shit
sure.
too.
For
And I've
sure.
had to unravel it in my own brain and really examine my own thoughts about myself, about other women, and how other women are like supposed to behave and stop judging people. And
Yeah.
it's been
It's
a huge education. And I can't even imagine having religion on top of that.
right.
Yeah.
And that your eternal life. So this life is like, there was a big joke going around in the evangelical church where this lady was like, I'm going to charge all my credit card because Jesus is coming back. I can live however I want because Jesus is coming back, kind of thing. There was a whole point to that, and it's gone. It's completely gone. I don't know why I brought that up, but it, yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
Well, I can jump in on that because this is one of my favorite stories, is this concept of, which again, we did not have in Christian Science, thankfully. It's preparing for Armageddon or Jesus returning or whatever, some kind of end of the world as we know it. Look, we didn't really
Did
have
not
that
have that.
concept. No.
You did not. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but one of my favorite historical stories is of the Millerites, which were the original, they became Jehovah's Witnesses later.
Oh, fun.
And they've, Jehovah's Witnesses are an Armageddon based group. It's very much about
Okay.
Armageddon, apparently.
Okay.
This is what's a new thing I learned.
Oh, I didn't know.
So the Millerites in I think the 1840s, they were following this leader who said the world is coming to an end, sell off all your properties, let all your crops fail, and come join me on the mountain at this date and time, and we'll all ascend up to heaven and be with Jesus.
Yes.
And of
Yes.
course it didn't happen, as it never
Yes.
does.
Mm-mm.
And this phenomenon of this moment for these people is called the Great Disappointment.
No. Is it still hashtag great disappointment?
Yeah, I mean, you can look it up in Wikipedia. Like, it's a real thing that they call it. I'm always like, well, that's, first of all, that's my new band name. Second of all, that's amazing.
Amazing.
And I'm shocked that this keeps happening, where people keep throwing their material lives away and running up their credit cards and giving away all their money to some televangelist because they really think the second coming is imminent.
Yep.
Even though we've been told this for hundreds and maybe thousands of years, and it still has never happened when people say it will.
100%. Because it's ridiculous. The whole thing is, it's science fiction. I mean, it's a sci-fi movie is what it is. That's why I love sci-fi, because it makes, at least in that world, it makes sense. This is reality. So let me get this straight. I am going to sacrifice my entire life on planet Earth, the one shot I get, hoping to get to fucking death in heaven. None of that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
None
and as
of
an
it.
Ex-Mormon pointed out to me, their promise is that you'll be able to live with your family in heaven for all eternity. And they're like, I have to live with these people?
That's a no thank you. That's a hard pass.
That doesn't sound so great to me.
Now start thinking with your head, like, so I can't have any fun. You cannot have any fun. And then I have to hurry up and die. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
And it's so dark. I mean, it's so dark to enforce upon anybody, but especially children, constant thoughts of death and destruction. And children shouldn't be thinking about that shit. Like,
no, they shouldn't be thinking.
That's awful. How traumatizing is that?
It's traumatizing, because that's what it was for me. Like, oh God, it's just so painful to think about it, because I had to sacrifice. I don't know. No one protects the children. That's the thing. They think they are protecting the children by placing them in these camps.
Yeah.
But one time I was at a youth group. I went to youth group all the time. I have done so much church. It's my high school. I was at chapel every Wednesday. College chapel every day. But I am proud to say I flunked chapel my senior year. And on my transcripts.
Wow. Why did you flunk it? What happened?
Because I couldn't take the bullshit. I could not take it. So stuff had started bubbling for me. Me being a woman, me coming into my own, started bubbling, and just seeing all the hypocrisy, the shame-based love that was being touted, the I'm better than you, the judgments. Oh, doesn't it feel great when you're the one judging, right? I mean, it's so great. It feels so great. And being in that position, and that you know something better than all these other people. They're all going to burn in hell. I can smell the smoke from here. It's this whole thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was a real hard part for me. And like, one of the dudes was sexually assaulting some of my college roommates, and Like, that's the thing. That shit is happening and it blows the lid right off.
Yeah.
So I think, as a woman, just seeing all of this, just kind of just making sense for myself outside of what the church was telling me. At least I had a soul in there knocking, saying, hey, 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 you're
Yeah.
okay.
There was something in you that just said, this isn't right. Yeah.
I don't feel more freedom. In fact, I feel less. In fact, I feel more judged than I've ever felt. I so I keep going. So I sin during the week, come back, ask and repent, and then go back out. And it's this constant cycle, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. I'm tired thinking about it. Can we just be okay on a Tuesday?
Yeah. Can we just live our lives?
You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
I mean, that was the most freeing thing for me, leaving the like actual practice of Christian Science. As I've talked about, like all these religions, they make you do so much stuff. You have to show up and go to things and like read shit and spend a lot of time praying, and just the freedom from all of that. Like you said, it's exhausting, like
Yeah.
physically exhausting, not even, let's not even talk about emotionally exhausting, but it's just so much crap that you don't need in your life. Like, can I just get up on a Sunday and enjoy some waffles and just stare out the window? Like, I just
Yeah,
want to do
no,
that.
no, there's no divine in that. There's no God in that.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing is batshit. Um, One thing that was really hammered home with me is me third. Have you heard of that?
Mm.
Me third. God first, other second, me third.
Oh, okay.
So the me third mentality um, is so you just get further and further and further away from you, right? Because if God's first of all, what does that mean? Thank God there's a white man telling me what that means. Okay, so there's that. Then other second, period. Other second. So there's no mask, there's no emergency kit for me first. It's I get that. If the plane is going down, if God is nowhere, then I have to put it on my passenger so that I die in their place. It's very hairball. And that was what therapy was able to help me understand. Oh, I don't need to feel shame for not going to church or wearing the skirt. Like, this isn't like I have a self in there. And that's kind of important too. Not does that make sense? The me
Oh,
third
yeah.
pisses me off.
I was going to say, I have this very intense memory of being 6 years old, and I had a little friend who was maybe like 8, and I think she was also a Christian Scientist. She must have been. Um, and she told me that concept. She didn't call it that. But
Mhm.
I remember very distinctly having this conversation where it was, you're not allowed to put yourself first. It should always be about other people. You're never allowed to, and she even said, like, you just can't think of yourself. Like, don't ever think about yourself and what you want. It's always other people. And that
Suppress.
was very intense in me. Like, I internalized that at
Oh,
6,
really?
and it just carried on. And it's probably still there, this feeling. I mean, especially for women, we tend to
It ties together.
self-sacrifice a lot.
This is what I'm saying. It all
Yeah.
ties
There's
together.
still a lot of guilt about putting yourself first, about doing self-care, about doing things you want to do. Yeah, there's a lot of guilt.
It's funny. Like, this is kind of a pinnacle in it. Like, where my daughter is able to go on this spring break trip to Spain and Mediterranean. They're like doing these beautiful things, and it costs a fortune. And she's making money and all this. I mean, I was going to Mexico and okay, just in witnessing. So there's like this pride, like, yes, she's gonna actually go enjoy a culture and not
Yeah.
witness to it and save it.
Yeah.
Juxtaposed to, so I'm about to turn 50, and there's a big birthday celebration in Palm Springs for me, and it's not even near as much as it is for my daughter's trip. And I am struggling. I'm still struggling to justify the cost for me to spend $600 or whatever,
Mm,
$1,000 versus my, it
yeah.
still plays out. And it's tricky. I'm okay to sacrifice for my kids. I'm okay with that. That's okay. But I'm not talking about sacrifice. I'm talking about, this is innate in me.
Yeah.
Others are more important than me.
Yep.
But now I'm almost 50, bitch, and TikTok shit is about me.
Yeah.
Gotta fucking, right? Like, I don't mean that like women aren't supposed to say that, but there is a level of truth to that. I've got to take care of me and my own mental health. And it's hard. The wires are definitely hardwired, or I'm hardwired that way.
Yeah. I mean, Madeline and I both struggle from that. And I would chalk it up more to being raised by a narcissistic mother than Christian Science, to be honest. But
Yeah.
having those two things together
Yeah.
really compounded this thing of like, it's never okay if it's about you. You know, we actually bought, when we both came out of our mother relationship, we both got this book about, written for daughters, adult daughters of narcissistic mothers, and it's called um Will I Ever Be Enough, or Will It Ever Be About Me, or something like that, or like, when is it okay for it to be about me?
Is it my turn, or is it time
Yeah.
for heaven or hell now?
When is it my turn? And I know one of the first things that Mad said to me before she even really split from our mother, one of the first terms she used, which I knew meant that something was happening with her mentally, she said, "You know, I'm just sick of being a people pleaser." And I was like,
Ooh, yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Let's stay there for one
She said,
thought
"I'm just
second.
going to make a New Year's resolution. I'm just not going to be a people pleaser anymore." And I was like,
Maddie said
okay,
that,
well,
right?
that sounds great. Let's, I support that.
That is wild. It's wild radical freedom. Can you
Yeah.
imagine the thing? Can you imagine? And like, it's funny when we were driving to college, I went to Northwest University. They had just changed the name from Northwest Bible College. Just to give you an idea where I was heading. And my grandmother and my mom and my brother, and we drove up from California up until Seattle, and we like laid over in Portland, and we're sitting there, and my grandma and I got in this huge fight. And my grandmother is the matriarch of our family. She is the matriarch, right? She's 95. She's still kicking it.
Mm,
Uh, but she's still, I mean, just at Thanksgiving started sobbing because she saw us drinking wine. Sobbing.
wow.
Kind of held me and said, "Do you see Jesus? He misses you." And like starts crying, and just this
Mm,
whole feeling. And I was telling my mom, and she goes, "Sarah, if you could just give her a little Jesus, like tell her you're okay so she can die peacefully."
mm.
Whew. So that's just kind of where it is now. But back then, when we were driving up to college, we got in this big fight, and I would never do this with her because me third. Um, and she was like, "Sarah, what you're gotta do," because basically I was going to college to meet my husband. And I would say probably 95% of the women I knew were going to college to meet their Christian counterpart. And it's so fucking gross when I think about it. We were babies, just babies. And my grandmother said, well, even though she was dropping me off at college, she's like, "You still need to be able to serve the Lord and make a good meal, Sarah. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to be a good wife." And I remember just feeling like, well, then why the fuck am I going to college? None of it made sense, because I think a lot was happening at that time, Hillary. I think trying to figure out how to be a woman,
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to be happy.
Are you
No,
allowed to be happy? Are you allowed to
yeah,
even think about your own happiness?
I can't. It's crazy. And it's funny to watching my daughter be free in her body, and it's so different. It's so different. It's so different. I'm so proud of her. I'm
Yeah.
proud of us that we did that. Anyway, I just
Yeah.
bring
I mean, I've definitely found it fascinating as my kids get older, watching them at their ages and thinking about where I was at their age,
yeah.
you know. mentally and where I was with Christian Science. And especially as my older boy starts to get to be junior high school age, that's where it was all like really intense for me. And
Yes.
I I think of those years with a great deal of sadness and shame, honestly.
For
That was
sure.
the time when I had terrible trichotillomania. I used to pull out my eyelashes because I was so anxious. And that went on for years and was like this horrible, nightmarish thing in my life that, in a way, was kind of an early step out of Christian Science because I could not stop doing it. I could not heal myself of this thing.
Your spirit was like, your soul inside of you was like, something's off. Something's
Yeah, I was like,
off.
in Christian Science, they say I can't get a handle on it, and that's I cannot get a handle on this. Why is this so out of control? And I felt so out of control because it's a compulsive disorder where
Sure,
you don't want to do the thing,
sure, sure.
keep doing it for
Yeah.
some bodily stress hormone reason,
And release and some
and
sort
release. It
of
was a
release.
relief from whatever I was feeling as a, pubescent girl. And, I look at my son, and it's not like he's not going to have his own struggles unique to today's world and being a boy and things I don't understand, but he's free of that. He's free of, if you have a problem, you have to fix it, you know? He's free of, like, because deep down, even though we didn't have the concept of sin, there was this thing of, if you're struggling, look into yourself to see what you did to cause this struggle. So it's similar. It's like we might as well have had sin for how it was
Yeah,
presented to
it
us,
is.
you know?
We called it you have unconfessed sin. So
Mhm.
if your marriage is falling apart, there's unconfessed sin. If you're overweight, unconfessed sin. If you're insert anything, unconfessed sin.
Mm,
So it was constantly making you look at it's, well, you second guess everything at that point because is this going to cause me to sin? And Jesus is a fickle bitch. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, from what this is telling me, like got to walk on the straight and narrow in order to get to heaven. I
yeah.
just,
And then there are instances where you've done nothing wrong and yet some bad thing happens to you.
I had a bad thought. I had a
It's
bad thought.
like,
Even
well,
your thinking is sin.
yeah.
You know what
Yeah,
I
you
mean?
can't win.
You cannot win. You cannot win. But it is interesting you're bringing up the kids because it is a different watching them go through the cycle that when we were that age is so it brings up a lot. And
Yeah.
I'm also like, fuck yeah, Sarah, good fucking job. You did this. You were able to not lay your daughter with these burdens. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
can't so that it frees up her to be in her own body
Yeah.
and listen
And to
to
be her
her
own person.
own. Yes. It's
Yeah.
really interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I know that hopefully on a minor level, because they were raised by me, my kids will inherit certain things that
For sure.
probably aren't that positive.
You mean
But
you got some unconfessed sin, Hillary?
yeah. But I always think, like, so my mother was the child of an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
She was not an alcoholic herself, thankfully,
Mm-hmm.
but I was raised by the child of an alcoholic.
Good point.
So it's
Yeah.
like this multi-generational thing
Yeah.
that just passes down. So whatever, like, anxiety, depression, whatever weirdness she got from growing up in that household, she
Bada
then
bing.
raised me with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Have you
like to think that as the years go by and as time goes by and we become more aware and people go to therapy, which I've certainly done, that we can, like, remove the intergenerational trauma down to just like a dull whisper,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But the
And
fact is, like, my kids are the great grandchildren of an alcoholic.
it's there. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We're not, yeah, no, it is. It's a little crazy when you think about it like that. Too, have you heard of that book, The Body Keeps Score?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to read it. Have you?
It's hard. It's a hard one. It's hard, but I think that there's some really good stuff with that. But breaking generational shit is my jam.
Yeah.
Is
Breaking
my
cycles.
jam.
Absolutely.
And here's the thing, I fuck up all the time. But my apology in the moment to my kids. Sometimes I feel like I'm on an apology tour a little bit. Like, wait,
Yeah.
that's an old track. That's an old track that just came into my consciousness. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then you have to kind of, because I'm not trying to put my stuff on you.
Yeah.
My kids are all through adoption, so it's a different kind of, it's not so much genetic, but it's still there. They're dealing with their own genetic stuff and makeup,
Yeah.
right? So it's a sensitive and an honor to like raise these children. And my husband always says, I just want to do as much damage as humanly possible.
Yeah.
And then say you're sorry for the rest.
Yeah. And a genuine apology goes a long way with children.
Did
Very
you ever get
forgiving
an
little
apology?
beings.
Have you ever gotten an apology from an adult when you were that age?
No.
Oh, fuck no, you
Nope.
weren't. Nobody gave you space to say, oh, I see you, Hillary. I
No.
see you. Let me
Children
go.
couldn't have anxiety. Children couldn't be depressed. Children couldn't. No, that didn't exist. That existed only for adults.
That is who got it the most.
Yeah. So Sarah, where are you at now as far as, mental health, like your beliefs? How are you doing?
Yeah, good, good. So therapy really helped. It changed my life. Until ironically, and this is interesting, I was in it a long time, that it started feeling like a religion.
Mm,
And I was ready to say, I'm at my max, and this is what therapy was able to do for me. I was at my max, and I told my therapist, I don't know if I'll ever be cured in the therapeutic process. And that's another thing with therapy. Like, so I was like, is this starting to feel religious? Now, granted, it changed my life in every way. I realized I had a self, and I was able to advocate for myself. And part of that was saying, after 5 years of 3 days a week therapy, I was in intensive therapy at the time. Not honestly, I was having a nervous breakdown in some ways, because again, this is the only community you've never known. These are the rules you live by.
and it's your family that you genuinely care about,
And it's so confusing and hard. And oh God, it was really hard. And so therapy was able to catch me and reframe. So from that, I feel like I've been able to, it's really important for me to understand and name things for me, my feelings. I like to process things. I'm a processor. Let's do it out loud. Let's get there together. And that's probably my religion, to be honest, if I had to have one, is connection and community. Is super valuable to me, but not so much so that I lose myself. Does that make sense? Anytime I feel like I'm losing my sense of myself is when I have to take a back step.
Yeah.
I'm the only one here. This is the only thing I am in charge of is myself. So my mental health, it's been a lot. Like the first time I sat on the sofa at the therapist, I said, I feel like I'm going to tell you something, and a bolt of lightning might come down and you might be fried in the process. But I actually don't think Jesus, I think he was probably a cool dude. But I just don't believe he died for my sins, and rose from the dead 3 days later so that I could be completely fucked up. And I didn't die from it. A bolt of lightning didn't shoot out of the sky. And I was like, oh, so interesting. I didn't die because I renounced Jesus. It was really great. I didn't die. That was the great news.
Yeah, I thought I was going to die too. Yeah, when I finally said the words out loud, like, I don't believe in God anymore, I really thought I was going to walk out of my front door and get hit by a bus, and that would be it. Like, I was convinced I was going to die.
It scares me even now talking about it. Like,
there's a little bit like, maybe it's going to happen now.
Yeah. I was like, hold on. Hold on. It would be a badass story. A bolt of sky and killed Sarah. But no, it really, I've done a lot of work around it mentally, Hillary, and your sister and I, thank God, were cycling, getting out of religion literally around the same time. And like, I remember your sister like recommending books to me through Christian Science. And I was super interested because I was still in my thing. And then when we both started pulling away, we're both like, oh my God, we might lose everything. Our moms, my family, but I'm not dead. I didn't die from it. I didn't die from losing my religion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't stress that enough, that it's how real that fear was of actually dying. I really genuinely thought I was going to die. Yeah.
1000%. I can totally, like, just even talking about it and knowing that if any of my family were to listen to this, or some of my family, just how it'd be devastating, because in their mind I have died. In their mind I have chose the fiery brimstone of make-believe hell. Meanwhile, these women and these people are in fucking hell on earth with their
Yeah.
own fucking thing. Like, it's crazy.
Like the
It's
definition of irony right there, you know?
kind of. I mean, but it's paralyzing. And when you're hardwired with how to survive life in a certain prescribed way,
Mhm.
it's a lot of work to undo it.
Yeah. Yeah. In Christian Science, the main coping mechanism is denial.
Oh, good. Yeah,
You
that's
know,
great.
just pretend it's not real. Don't talk about it. Don't look at it. Don't point at it. It's like that scene from Spinal Tap. Well, don't point. Don't at the guitar. You know, it's like, don't look at it. Don't point at it. Don't breathe on it. It's like that. Yeah.
So great. That's so great.
You know? So having to find alternate coping mechanisms that aren't just don't look at it is difficult. Like, I was never taught coping mechanisms. I was never taught conflict resolution, which is something I had to learn the hard way when I finally got into like a real
Yeah.
adult relationship, something I had
Yes.
no concept of.
Yes. Yes. Isn't that crazy?
And once again, I have to thank the media, because if I didn't watch tons of like television and reality shows, especially ones that are about therapy, that are about
Yeah.
relationships, I
Yeah, they
wouldn't
do.
fucking know how to do anything.
That's exactly right.
That's where I learned.
Totally. It's so true though.
Yeah.
It's it's really funny. So do you have friends who have never been in any sort of organized religion
Oh yeah,
and
lots.
who look at you who think you're crazy, or like that you grew up, like, it's so different how we grew up from a lot of the world. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think sure. I mean, if I ever had a conversation really describing it, I think yes, they would think I was crazy.
Yeah.
But I also think they're my friends and they have a lot of empathy for me. So
Totally. I just find myself when I'm explaining to my friends who were raised like not like this at all, and they're like, "Wait, what? Wait, what?" And I'm like, "Oh, so that didn't happen to you? Oh, that's so weird." Like, it's almost like a comparison. And then sometimes I feel a little bit still sad about it. Like, I feel like I survived a lot of my life instead
yeah,
of
me
lived
too.
my life. And I gave up church for Lent. I just had to, because I can't do it anymore. I'm exhausted.
Yeah,
It's too much. It's asking too much. And I want to put on some dancing shoes before I fucking die.
exactly.
You
Claim some
know?
joy here. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's one big regret I have is, and again, a regret kind of implies that you could have done something differently, which
exactly.
I couldn't have.
No, you
But
couldn't.
I regret that I spent so much of my young life in so much emotional turmoil. I mean, I was a very, very profoundly unhappy person in my 20s and 30s. Even though I was doing a lot of like fun and interesting things,
Yeah.
um, I was depressed. I was very depressed and had a lot of anxiety and panic attacks that at times really ruined my life and made
Were
me
you
like not
able,
functional.
were you able to identify when you were having depression and anxiety, or did you just think, like, where were you in knowing that word depressed was a real word?
I think I knew.
You did. Okay.
Yeah. So it wasn't like I couldn't identify it,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what to do about it. Like I knew I was having panic attacks. I knew what to call them. And at
Yeah.
one point, when I was even in Christian Science, I happened to have health insurance through this union I was in, and I went and tried to get beta blockers. I just went
Yeah.
in like, look, I'm non-functional, like I can barely leave the house. And so
Yeah.
they were like, well, why don't you start with this? And so I took like one and then felt guilty and just like never did it again. Cause in my mind, like, oh, it didn't work. I like didn't
Yeah.
really give it a shot. But
Yeah.
I really, really wish that I had known earlier stuff about toxic relationships, which I didn't understand until, the last like decade or so. I wish I'd known about practical ways to handle anxiety,
Yeah.
which I had to teach myself through. I've talked about this in Madeline's episode through that series, This Emotional Brain.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
realized,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
we can actually train ourselves out of
Yeah.
this loop, this cycle, because anxiety is like a
Loop.
tornado of
Yeah.
cyclic things.
Yeah.
There are techniques. It's not, I'll always be an anxious person. I may have some terrible instance later in life where I'll go through a really anxious period and have panic
Hey,
attacks again. Life is life, things
yep.
happen.
Yep.
But I can honestly say that I at least now have tools. I had no tools
Right.
for most of my adult life. And I feel like I wasted a huge amount of time panicking, being depressed, not
Yeah.
being joyful. And it was a waste. It was a waste because I was a young, healthy
Well,
person.
and for me, I think similarly, I think when that, I don't know, maybe this is childhood stuff and just being raised again by wolves. I mean, I was raised by wolves, basically, and there's a ton of depression, a ton of anxiety, and we weren't allowed to have that,
Yeah.
right? Because it was unconfessed sin.
Yeah.
And so I remember our father left when we were young, very young, and just a total a-hole. And at the altar calls, I mean, I cannot tell you how many times people came up to me in that fucking church and would say, "You've got to forgive your father.
Oh,
Forgive your father." Hey, bitch, how do you say? I'm 10. How do
so
I don't even?
invasive. God.
And it's an urgency. You must forgive. Okay, well, I'm 10. He just left. He keeps leaving. He keeps re-injuring. And then my mom's re-injuring. And
Ugh.
thank God the church is here to tell me what steps I need to do. I mean, and round we go. And the only way it stopped for me is getting the fuck out.
Yeah. Well, and there's nothing more aggravating, infuriating, really, than being told to forgive somebody who probably doesn't deserve to be forgiven, first of all.
No, and that's so interesting right there. That right there is powerful, right? Because when you're in a religion, you have to forgive.
Yeah.
That's kind of, or else brimstones, guys,
Is very,
brimstones.
very toxic. I've had major issues with, and this exists in Christian Science too, to some extent, this call to forgive all the time, no matter what, and
All
turn
the,
the other cheek like Jesus did. And I just think that's complete bullshit.
well, it's so invalidating, right? It's
Yeah.
so, I need to remind you yet again that you're not a person. You're not your own individual. This is part, like forgiveness is so loaded with the church. I actually think if I can just learn to forgive myself, let's just start with that. That
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, okay, I don't know. I just, it's too much, Hillary. Too much to put on these kids. It's too much.
Yeah, here's a pretty dark story, but this is very Christian Science. So, as you know, many children have died because of lack of medical care. And there is one story, I don't remember whose story it is, but I probably wouldn't say their name anyway, but who, in the process of losing their toddler, who was sort of dying in front of them over several days, one of the practitioners, which would be like the Christian Science doctor that they called for prayerful help, said, "You need to get things right with your father. That's why this is happening. And you need to sit down and write him a letter and resolve things because that's what's blocking the healing. So you need to do that." So this poor woman who's in the worst moment of her entire life, whose child is dying and can't get him help because of all these coercive things going on around her, has to sit down and write her fucking father, who probably didn't deserve to be reconnected with. She had to write him a letter.
Save her son in her mind.
Yeah, because it was her fault that her son was
That's
in
right.
this situation. It was all her fault.
That's right.
I mean, it's
Round and round.
sadistic. Like, it makes me so angry. It's pure sadism at that point, you know?
Sad. It's sadism. And I love that. It's sadism. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. It just, there's something really, I just, the forgive me, the emphatic forgiveness that I still deal with my family. You must forgive. Okay, well, bitch, show me how to do that. I don't, what are you talking about? Like, it's so it doesn't even how do you forgive, Hillary? What does that even mean?
Yeah, what does it mean?
What does it
Exactly.
mean? Like, I don't understand what you're asking me to do. It's something you can't do yourself. Anyway, it drives me insane.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
I had to do the father leather too. Dear.
Yeah, it's a terrible line for you to walk as your family's still in your life. You know, you still have to be re-traumatized constantly. I've had the luxury of the last almost 20 years without having to deal with the, toxic family members that got me into this nonsense. So
Yeah.
I definitely feel so much sadness and empathy for people like you who you want to keep these people in your life. Like, they're still your family, you still love them, but there's all this other stuff going on and you have to walk that line of, how do I see them for holidays and have my kids be in their life, but keep myself safe at the same time? Like, it's almost impossible to do those two things.
Well, and I would ask you too, like, even this last bit where my grandmother, and I think mostly when my grandmother passes, most of it will go with her. But I had a really strong connection with my grandmother all growing up. I mean, I just idolized her. And she's 95. And this idea of giving her my salvation so she could pass peacefully coming up. And I feel really conflicted about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. My mom's like, well, who cares? Just, who cares? Just tell her. And I was like, because I feel like I'm being raped. Like, I don't, and I'm not using that word lightly. It does feel like a violation for me.
Yep.
But I have to pretend to get you to the other side. I don't know. And then I don't know. She's 95 and she's 95.
Yeah.
It's
really, really hard.
Yeah. So
take
that's
care of yourself.
Yeah. How about that?
Or do you once again sacrifice yourself for
Others?
someone else's comfort, basically?
Me third.
Yeah, me
Me
third.
third. Yeah, it's crazy. It really is.
Well, I'm sorry you're dealing with that.
Thanks. Yeah. It never ends.
Really hard. That's really
It
hard.
never ends.
Yeah.
Especially, do you have a place you go to, Hillary, that there are different parts of the world when you're there? You remember that young Hillary? Like she was growing up?
Probably if I went to Boston. If I went to Boston, for sure. But New York is like that for me. I mean, I left New York at 20 and I was still very much into Christian Science when I left. And actually, the last time I went in 2019, I had a little bit of a nervous breakdown.
Yeah. Yeah. In 2019?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I realized how much of New York and the old me is still present. I think the person I was when I was there, how much of her is still present, as much as I've tried to shut it all away and move to California and live this whole other life. And it was sort of bittersweet. It wasn't like a all bad, I hate this feeling. It was sort of like, oh, I see. She's still there.
Yeah. I find sometimes it's helpful, and I'll tell you why. Like when I go to Yuba City, that's the town I grew up in. That's where there was a church on every corner. It was a very blue collar farming community where there's, you know, churches and ATMs on every corner. Like it just, or it would go church, ATM, liquor store, church, ATM, liquor store, right?
Fun store here and there.
Yeah, it's really neat. But it's funny when I was going, I have had to go back a lot because I have work up there, and I'm walking through the old Sarah, walking through, this is where I witnessed to somebody. And you forget those memories and they just come flooding back. And so it's been helpful to look at them and be the boss now.
Yes. Yeah.
And look and forgive Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
And go, you look what you fucking did.
Yeah, and take a little moment of pride to see how far you've come.
You didn't stay here, hon. You were supposed to stay here and raise these babies in the Christian faith, and you were all this stuff, and you didn't. And nobody showed me how to get out but myself.
Yep.
And that fucking fires me up.
Yeah.
If we get myself out of that, then I can do it. Honestly, Hillary, dude, I can do anything.
Yeah. It's really important to recognize, to give yourself credit. That's an excellent way to revisit your hometown. I think it's probably better than how I did it.
No, and because we keep going, because she's there, like you said, that 20-year-old's still there, those programs, that hard wiring is still there. And so it's really fun to go back, and it gets me sometime. It sucker punches me. You should do a show in Boston and in New York. That would be really primal, because it brings up all those old parts of you that were shoved down. Yeah. And then you look at them and go, oh, right, I'm a badass bitch.
Look at what I've done.
And take the narrative back. They don't get Boston. They don't get that. Like, I don't know. There's a fighter spirit in me in there.
Yeah. And I have that spirit too. And I really think not everybody has that.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably one of many keys as to how we were able to pull this off and live like authentic lives. There was something in us that was like, no.
I love that we pulled it off. That's my very favorite thing. We did. And I still don't know how we did it, because we didn't have the support of the church.
Yeah. Or family, certainly. I mean, you and I definitely did not have family that supported our departure from our religions.
No, in fact, I mean, we got cut out of the will. I got cut out. The will, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, just.
But we did it.
We did it, and I can't believe it. And I'm so thankful. I feel like I survived. Like they say, if you, what is it? The New York saying, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. I kind of feel like that with religion. If you can get out there, bitch, you can do anything.
Yeah.
Anything.
You're more powerful than you know.
That's sure. Right. I'm not done yet. And that's the other thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a wonderfully positive note to end this on.
Yeah.
It's been great talking to you and hearing more of your story. I was always really curious.
Yeah.
What this group was like, and what your journey has been like. I know that my sister also has mentioned how you kind of were both unraveling at the same time, and how interesting that must have been. So it's really good to hear that.
I don't know what I would have done without her.
Yeah. Yeah,
because it really, you need somebody when you leave. Whatever. I mean, and some people don't, but for me I did, and it was a huge support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been great talking to you, Sarah. And
so much, Hillary.
Yeah, we'll see each other in real life again one of these days soon.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Thank you, honey. If you need anything else, let me know.
Okay.
All right. You be well, hon.
You too. Thanks for listening to Leaving Christian Science. Disclaimer: I'm not an expert. I'm not a historian. I'm not a therapist. I'm just an ordinary, imperfect human who had the misfortune of being born into Christian Science. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guests and do not necessarily represent those of the host. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional, medical, legal, or psychiatric advice.